The Profectory Podcast, Mastering the Mind and Market. Hosted by Manny Teran, we explore what it takes to succeed, both in business and within yourself. From strategy and business growth to mindset and resilience, we provide the tools to lead with clarity, confidence, and wisdom. Welcome back to the Profectory Podcast, Mastering the Mind and Market, where we help you, the entrepreneur, the high achiever, the business leader, to maximize your goals, maximize your success, create massive change in this world, all the while preserving your inner peace, preserving your relationships, preserving your way of seeing beauty in this world. I say this because as high achievers, as business people, as entrepreneurs, we tend to run towards this goal of success, of power, of fame, whatever you're looking for, oftentimes sacrificing our friends, our relationships, our health. And there is a way. It isn't easy, but it is simple. And so this is what this podcast was created for. And today's podcast in particular, we're exploring how do you really balance the idea of keeping your head down, consistency, drive, all the while keeping your head up, looking around, vision, being able to be nimble, all in a world that is filled with chaos, that's filled with tariffs and inflation and impending war. It's sort of mind-boggling. And there is a way, and I'm going to talk about that today. We'll also explore a handful of companies that were not only able to survive through tumultuous times, but thrive. So in this first part, there's a lot of tension in the world right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's excitement, but with that, there's fear. Let me give you some examples. With AI is such a giant behemoth of a topic, and it's moving so fast. And there's talks of when will AI take over the world? All these crazy things, and whether or not that's going to happen or not, you can't control it. It's already in motion. The way that the world works, and in my previous life when I was working alongside Adam Hartung at Spark Partners, I learned a lot about the power of trends. And no matter what people do, whether that's a government, whether that's a series of businesses, if there's a trend that's unfolding, there's no way to stop it. And AI is one of those. I'm actually going to do a whole series on AI here because it's not only very relevant, but it's also confusing, and it's filled with a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt. So I'm going to go through that later. But today's podcast is that dilemma of heads up versus heads down. Heads down is when you're focused on your mission, when you're looking at, you've got something that you're working on, you're just driving forward. And what happens is that oftentimes that drive forward can lead us into a road of ruin. We have to have some amount of vision looking out into the market. We have to see where things are shifting. Otherwise, we become irrelevant. And irrelevancy is a very, very detrimental, very disgusting thing to happen to you. And I've met with entrepreneurs, I've met with people that have, at least in what they've told me, whether or not they are or not, it's a different story. They have told me that they have become irrelevant. And you can just look in their eyes that they are just absolutely crushed. Whatever happened, the market shifted and they did not. And as a result, they lost their business, they lost their livelihood, and it's a terrible thing. So you have to maintain an eye on where the market is shifting. Otherwise, you'll have that situation happen to you. So how do you do both? How do you manage keeping your head down with keeping your head up? And it's really about creating a different operating system. I've mentioned this in previous podcasts about how we have a 200,000-year-old operating system that we operate from. And we need to add some additional programming there so that we see things differently. The first thing is consistency in action. What I mean by that is that you need to actually have a plan that you're executing and you're doing it daily, whether that is creating a startup, whether that's growing your own business, whatever that is. You've got to have consistency. Consistency will eat great ideas for breakfast, That's just how it goes. But here's the deal with consistency is you have to also build in being nimble in that consistency. What I mean by that is in the process of being consistent, create a piece of that where you go out and look at what's happening in the market. So what you're doing here is you're shifting your way of seeing. And that kind of goes to the second thing, which is clarity and vision. Clarity and vision is creating a planned way of looking at things from different perspectives. We are all human beings, and we're all, either it's a curse or a blessing, whatever you want to call it. We have things from our own perception. My vision here, looking at this camera, looking at this equipment, is much different than your vision wherever you might be watching this podcast. And your mother's vision, wherever she might be looking down or looking wherever, her vision is also different. So this is all different visions. But what we have to do in the case of maintaining that balance, and I'll come back to that word balance. I've used this many times already. I've described how, I'll just do it now actually. Balance is a word that is very difficult if you think about what it means. Balance is hard. I had a CEO that I worked for that I asked naively, hey, Mark, how do you balance, being the CEO and maintaining a healthy relationship with your family? And he was into woodworking, he was in whatever, all these things. How do you balance? And he said, Manny, balance is hard. A tightrope walker, these situations, it's hard to balance. But what's more important is harmony. Harmony is something that is the ability of things to exist in the same plane, to coexist, so that one thing doesn't necessarily outperform or knock the other one over. They can all coexist in harmony, and that's more important. So clarity and vision is having that different perspective built in. So you look at things with your own perspective, you look at things with your customer's perspective, you look at things with your competitor's perspective, and all these different angles will give you a 360 view. And then also build that into when you talk to people around you, your own personal board of directors, ask them for their perspective. And so then you get some ability to remove bias, which is very dangerous, by the way. And the last thing is calm in chaos. Calm in chaos is extremely difficult to do. It sounds easy. Oh yeah, I'll just be calm when these things happen. But what happens is we actually are hijacked by our 500,000-year-old operating system. So we have the 200,000-year-old reasoning portion. We also have this reptilian brain in the back that really hijacks it. This is when we feel out of control, when we're in an argument and things just escalate, and all of a sudden we're like, what just happened there? So that's a different set of your brain. And that part, the amygdala, is powerful because it's responsible for fight or flight. If you're backed into a corner, whatever, if it's a perceived corner, it doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be a real saber-toothed tiger. It can be a perceived tiger in the sense of you're in an argument with your spouse and you're backed up against the corner. This thing riles up and you say things that you shouldn't say. I've been guilty of that many times. And the whole process that I've been going through over the past number of years is really to understand that and to train for that, in a sense of when that does happen, then I am not a victim to that. I'm not being subjected to this 500,000-year-old operating system standing up and controlling my words. I'm now able to have some ability to control that. And that's very powerful. So this idea of consistency in action, clarity in vision, and calm in chaos, that's our edge as Stoics. That's our edge as entrepreneurs. The ability to do this all together, that is a massive edge. And when you see people fall in business, it's because they missed one of those elements over time. These things you're gonna miss them from time to time, but if it happens consistently over time, then you're going to erode your success, and it's not a good place to be. The next thing here is the idea of what I call the Profectory dual lens. So this is one of the core tenets of Profectory is this idea, and this is why I'm excited about today's podcast, because it's a balance of looking down, being consistent especially with the Stoic principles. This is the daily discipline of the inner lens. You're showing up, you're building your habits, you're building your identity, you're keeping your standards high, irrespective of what's happening in the world. You are remembering your why, and you are leading from within. This is that first lens, the daily discipline, the inner lens. And that's the guiding light that you're creating for yourself on the inside. Now, a lot of these Stoic leaders that we look towards, and even with our own exploration of Stoicism, that is a core tenet. You grounding yourself while the world is going to hell, that's Stoicism 101. You realizing that you can't control the powers in Washington, you can't control the powers in what's happening in Iran right now at the moment. You can't control these things. But what you can control is your inner operating system. This and here, the mind, right? And then the other side is the outer lens, the strategic lens. This is the element of how do you travel that road? Where are you going towards? As a business, we have the job of solving problems for our customers. We're creating solutions for undermet or unmet needs. That's what we do. We're creating value, we're delivering value, and what happens is you need to have that perspective, that periscope out there looking at the next market, these trends that are all coalescing together. We need to maintain that, because otherwise we will fall into ruin, we will fall into irrelevancy, as I mentioned before. And we do that through trend analysis, scenario planning, and building relationships with not only our team. I mentioned this idea of a personal board of directors, a way that provides a method to erase as much as possible bias from your mind. Bias is crazy, and that really provides that perspective. Now, with my time at Spark Partners, I really learned this, but I've applied it in other times in my career. But this is really the element where we bring these things together. You bring the elements of the trend analysis, the business elements, all these things with the inner piece, the heads down, heads up, that dual lens, the inner lens, the outer lens, that is extremely powerful. And what Seneca wrote, the whole future lies in uncertainty, live immediately. So there's a certain sense of immediacy that we need to maintain. And we try to do this every day, at least I do in the morning, is I try to show gratitude. But with that gratitude, the other side of gratitude is scarcity. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I mean more in the sense that we have a limited time on this world, memento mori, that we need to really take care of our relationships, take care of what matters. It's more, I think precious is probably a better word than scarcity in that. And so here's a handful of companies that launched during some pretty crazy, tumultuous times and some turmoil. So let's make it real with number one, General Motors. GM was founded in 1908. At the time, the global recession and financial panic of 1907 was in full play. GM was built after the aftermath of a banking crisis. A lot of companies were consolidating or collapsing, and GM stepped in and doubled down on their innovation, and they organized themselves to create a massive company that's around today. So the Stoic virtue is really the idea of courage plus vision. So they knew that the automobile wasn't a luxury, it would become a mainstay of society. And so they stayed true to the heads down approach, creating some momentum in their manufacturing and how they produce these vehicles, all the while looking out and up towards what the market really wanted. So they were able to capitalize on those two things. And there has been, many hundreds, slightly sub thousand car companies out there, and they're one of the ones that survived to today. Number 2 is FedEx, founded in 1971. So the context was the Vietnam War. The oil crisis was brewing. There was high inflation. And Fred Smith founded FedEx with the idea of overnight delivery at a time when fuel for aircraft was skyrocketing, transport was skyrocketing. It didn't make sense, really, until it did. And that's because he saw what others missed, which was time was more important than anything else in logistics. Getting something from point A to point B in time was worth the value of what it costs to do that. And so that's important even today. If you look at Amazon, what they're doing, I ordered something last night at 11 p.m. and it was here in my front door by 6 in the morning. I needed some ant repellent. Boom, there, instantly. It's crazy. So the Stoic virtue for FedEx here is the blend of conviction and execution. The next one is Microsoft, founded in 1975. The context was stagflation. You have the Cold War in full swing. You've got the post-Vietnam disillusionment. You've got this sense of a lot of angst in the world. And while the world was wondering if America was in decline, Bill Gates and Alan were all for the personal computer. And they doubled down as well on the idea of reframing the idea of a mainframe, reframing the idea of what a computer really is, and really pushing towards having a personal computer in everybody's home. And they did accomplish that. And so how they did that, the Stoic principles were the long view. They believed that this would be something that would take place. It would take a decade or more to get there, and they stuck with it. And now, of course, Microsoft has shifted and is a lot more into the cloud computing with their Azure product line, and they're still doing computers, they're still doing a lot of things, but they've really pushed the limit on AI as well. They've made some acquisitions, and they're remaining relevant. They had some time there where they were not, and they were suffering from focusing too much on the personal computer. They've now moved past that, as we are now in a different domain. 10 years ago, it was mobility, which is still relevant, by the way, but it's now shifting a lot towards AI. And if you look at where they're spending their money, their investment money, you'll understand where they'll be going, where they're headed. And so that is during this three-part series I'm going to do here in the future on AI, we're going to look at some ways to understand how to see where companies are going towards by where they put their money in their investments. Number 4, Airbnb, founded in 2008. 2008, there was a financial crisis. There was real estate was going to hell. It was crazy times. Everybody was pulling back. And these founders opened their apartments and their homes to strangers because they saw an opportunity for, okay, look, everything's going to hell in a handbasket with the real estate market. How do we manage with these people that have vacant homes? How can we fill them? How can we get people to go on vacation without forking out a lot of money for a hotel? And so they did that, and it's still around today. Yeah, it's taken a few beatings, and yeah, it's got some issues to resolve. But ultimately, Airbnb created a pretty massive type of really a new kind of business right through the 2008 financial crisis. And the virtue is adaptability and grit. Grit is something that I'll come back to as well. That's a pretty powerful concept. And I actually did, Adam Hartig and I, and that must have been about 5 years ago, we did a great webinar on Growth Takes Grit. We might see if we can do that again here sometime soon. And number 5 is Tesla. They were founded in 2003, but they really surged post-2008. And the context here was the Iraq War, the global recession was still in play. There was a lot of talk of the big 3 automakers were going through the ringer. And the idea of electric cars in a gas-run world was just something that didn't make any sense. It was absurd. But Elon Musk saw the opportunity. He actually bought Tesla from a couple founders and was able to then take it to where it is today, which is a lot more than just a electric vehicle company. If you really look at what Tesla is, they're a platform company. They're an AI company. They're a asynchronous life company. They've really created a lot of things beyond what you see is the vehicles, the cars, but they're really an AI company, and we'll explore that in more detail down the road as well. And the Stoic virtue is purpose and boldness. So these are all elements that are very powerful. And so how do we apply this today? How do we deal with these things happening? And I'm going to ask some questions that you should ask yourself, because whether you're running a team, whether you're running a company, whether you're a solopreneur, whatever you might be doing, these are all very important questions that you should be asking of yourself, of your business. So number 1 is, where do I need to double down on discipline? Discipline is very closely tied to being able to execute on your vision. That is the inner lens, face down. Where can you double down on your discipline? Does that mean creating systems that make it easier for you to do what needs to be done? Does that mean that you need to hire people around you that will fill in the gaps? We've talked about the strength-based leadership in the past. If not, just you can even Google or look on YouTube for Clifton Strengths Finder. Where can we do that? Discipline is really difficult to do. It's easy to talk about, yeah, I'm going to do this, I have this plan. But you need to really create systems around your life so that you can transform your systems into habits and ultimately change your identity. I did a whole podcast on this before on getting things done. Check that out. Second thing is, where am I avoiding external signals out of fear? We have a sense sometimes as business people, we have this mindset of the chicken little. The sky's falling, so you know what? We're just going to stick our head in the ground and not worry about what's happening in the world around us. Now, the news, there's a lot of things in the news that can thrash you about, and I'm not suggesting you don't watch the news. I'm suggesting that you really are more cognizant of what fear does to you. So I know people that watch the news all the time. They have the news on constantly, and it's kind of a drag, honestly. But you got to stay informed. So what I personally try to do is I stay away from the news, except for one time during the day. I open the news, and I spend 20, 30 minutes scanning what's happening in the world. So it's not constantly hitting me all day long, but I need to stay up front of what's happening because of this podcast, of the business that I run, of my life, of my personal relationships. These are all elements that I really need to keep at least a pulse on what's happening in the news. So I'm not fearful of it, but I need to maintain a healthy relationship with the news. Number 3, where can I lead with both calm and clarity? And so these are elements of when I'm faced with a situation in my business, in my podcast, in my personal life. One of the first things I have learned to do over time, this has been a long, hard journey to learn how to do this, is when that first element of news comes across, or conversation comes across, or what they say, or what I say, or what I think, whatever happens, I take a pause. I take a 5-second pause, minimum, sometimes more. Because what I've learned, at least in my own life, is that I have a tendency to react and not to respond. So building in this 5-second, 10-second pause gives my brain a chance to catch up to that reaction, stop it, and then put in a response instead. And that there's something of that sort that can happen to you. I'm not sure. But look at all the times when you have the opportunity to lead. Do it with calm and clarity, because not only you'll make better decisions, you'll lead in a better way, but your people that will follow you, your employees, your family, whomever, will see a clearer path forward, an unobstructed path, if you lead with calm and clarity. And so to sort of sum up here is the world is tumultuous, it's full of turmoil, it's full of chaos, but there are paths you can take. There is the dual lens I talked about. There are these questions you can ask from yourself and from your team. There is a different perspective you can take in how you build in to your downward facing drive that creates a sense of if you want to think about it, almost like an agility, a nimbleness in being able to look at other things. And we looked at the outer lens, the vision lens, and creating a sense of direction so that you don't become irrelevant, so that you see things happening in the future. You can then shift yourself, shift your team, shift your resources towards the direction of that emerging trend, whatever it might be. Or if you have that periscope out and you see things happening with your competitors that can be a planet killer for you, then you can respond in a way that can not only help you to survive, but to thrive and even leapfrog what they're doing. So these are all things that are very powerful. And I would say ground yourself in virtue, build your business with discipline, create that calm and clarity in your life, and we'll talk to you very soon. Cheers.